Hey class, so today we're going to talk about retention and transfer of learning. We've kind of been talking about, kind of implying some of this idea of retention and transfer over the last couple of weeks, and today going to dive a little bit more into it and wrap up the last lecture of class. So, important definitions that we need to think of is learning is a change in the capability of a person to perform a skill, and forgetting is obviously the loss of such skill. And then motor memory is the persistence of the acquired capability for performance. So far our focus has been on what happens to information as it enters that system and is processed, and eventually leads to a response. However, our information needs to be retained for that future use. So the persistence of this information is stored for future processing, and that is called memory. So there's a two-component system. We have working memory, which is going to end up being our short-term memory, and then long-term memory, obviously being our long-term memory. And we're going to focus today. We'll talk about the phonological loop, visuospatial sketchpad, as well as the central executive, and go into a little bit of that long-term memory subsystems. So working memory, temporarily store and use recently presented information. So the phonological loop, short-term storage of verbal information. Visuospatial has to do with visually detected spatial information. And then the central executive coordinates information in working memory, including information retrieved from long-term memory. So in the working memory, presumably the environment information from that short-term memory can be integrated into information from long-term memory, creating what some term an action plan. We've talked about that. And that takes into account one's stored capabilities and specific environmental demands. So then the prepared movements are then triggered from working memory to generate muscle contraction as well as actions. So the working memory, think of it like RAM within your computer, stores information for a short time, has limited storage capacity for information storage. So long-term memory stores knowledge and information on a more permanent basis, appears to be limitless in capacity. So procedural memory is the storage of information about motor skills, what to do in a certain order. Semantic memory is factual and conceptual knowledge about the world from our many experiences. And episodic memory, storage of personal experiences and events. So when items are practiced, they're in some way transferred from short-term storage to long-term storage, where they can be held more permanently and protected from loss. Practice ends up resulting in the transfer of the skill to a more permanent storage space. And then long-term memory provides now the capability for making movements that have been practiced before, and this practice leads to the development of better or stronger long-term memory for movement, and these memories are often presented after many years, even without intervening use of that stored information. Now, the intention to remember, so memory can be intentional or incidental. Generally, the intention to remember leads to better performance than incidental. However, incidental memory is better than no memory at all. We store much more information than we really are aware of, and the application of telling someone they'll be tested on something will help to increase their intention now to remember. So retention and memory are related. Retention is the persistence or lack of persistence of the performance. Persistence being improvements in performance that should last over increasing periods of time. If we're able to store memory of the skill, then we should be able to retain that information and use it when needed. Another way to think about it, memory is the capability to perform. Retention is that outward manifestation or the performance. So we test performance to infer memory or learning, which is what we've been talking about with those retention tests. And we typically will look at different retention intervals or time between the end of practice and then that retention test. We have different retention tests that we do, or we look at absolute retention, so the level of performance on the initial trial of the retention test. So practice, and then how you perform on the initial trial or trials of the retention test. Then we look at relative retention as well, looking at the difference score, so the amount of lost skill or loss in skill over the retention interval. So the difference between performance at the end of practice and the beginning of the retention test. What we end up actually looking, so relative retention measures are possible using a different score or a percentage score. And really what we're looking at is how long does it take now to get back to where we started. So the percentage score is the amount lost during retention, the amount lost during retention interval over the entire amount of improvement gained during practice. So we're looking at a percentage of amount forgotten divided by the amount originally learned. And then we have a savings score, so savings in relearning a skill, so the number of trials required to return to the level achieved at the end of practice. So the more complete the retention, the faster we'll get back to where we initially started. And when we look at the skill type, continuous skills, the idea it's like riding a bike, right? Suggests continuous skills are retained for a longer period of time, as opposed to discrete skills, something like dart throwing. We've seen loss of performance occur after only 20 minutes. And then going even further, 1 year later, performance was just as poor if they had not practiced the skill at all. However, what they did find is that relearning appeared to be faster. So why is there a difference? Well, it could be based off the amount of the original learning. More practice, we know, leads to better retention. A continuous task can be seen as several discrete tasks. Therefore, you're practicing more on continuous tasks. And then retention loss. So now focusing on, we can't actually have retention loss. So it's not always related to lack of persistence or forgetting, right? But could also be caused by motivation, day-to-day fluctuation, drugs, or illnesses. So there might actually, we could have learned something, but it's just not we're just not performing well and not seeing that retention. Now, how well does something that we retain, or when we practice a skill, how does that now transfer? So transfer, looking at the persistence or lack of persistence of performance on a task that is different from one practiced. So we say that a skill acquired from one task may transfer to another task. So it's a very universally applied principle of learning. So all new learning occurs against a backdrop of prior learning, right? So a lot of things that we've learned previously can help us learn something else as well and potentially transfer. But this can facilitate, impede, or have no effect on new learning. So we can think of sports drills, rehab exercises, classrooms. When we're trying to really have something transfer from one thing to another, we need to take several things into consideration in terms of how closely those tasks are related to one another, as if there's a little bit of a difference, we might not see that transferability of the skill. So a common experiment we use when measuring transfer, we look at group 1 practices task A while group 2 does nothing. Then both groups practice task B. And then if group 1 learns task B faster than group 2, we can say that A can be transferred to B. Transfer can be positive or negative depending on whether performance on task B is better than or less than that of group 2. And then transfer can be forward and or retroactive based off that. Looking at percentage transfer, we're looking at a difference on first trial of task B between groups 1 and 2 divided by the total improvement of group 2 after practice of task B. It's kind of not really a great measurement. Depends on the amount of practice of task B, depends on the scoring system, nature of the subjects. So what we end up really looking at more is the saving score, so the amount of practice time saved on task B by having first practice task A. So finding the number of trials required for group 2 to reach the level of performance of group 1 on their first trial. So this becomes important if financial cost of practice is a factor. So cost of airplane flight is high, flight simulators versus actual flying time, right? So how much transfer actually occurs? So motor transfer is typically often overestimated. So when we think of, a quick drill is going to translate to quickness in the game, when really if there's temporal or spatial differences within the drills or the tasks, we're not really going to end up seeing that. So we typically see more transfer when tasks are very similar. So the rotary pursuit task at different speeds. Okay, this task involves tracking a spot on our target on a revolving wheel, trying to keep contact with a wand. So on repeated exposure, the amount of contact time maintained during a time trial, okay, can be used as a measure of motor learning as well as hand-eye coordination. So we're just kind of changing a little bit of the speed, right? But it's the same exact task. So why task similarity is essential? There's the identical elements theory. So elements are general characteristics of the skill or performance. They should be very similar. And then there's the transfer appropriate processing theory, in which cognitive processes should be similar as well. So the near and far transfer, near refers to the context of the skill that was practiced, and the second skill are very similar, so there's overlap. Then far is the two contexts are very different, meaning there's going to be very little overlap and potential for difficulty in transfer. Simulators are huge for transfer, okay? Possibly most common type of transfer scenario given research findings, okay? Learning a skill in a simulation does not always transfer to real life, okay? So the goal is now to make the simulations as real as possible. Simulations are often used blindly. Research indicates some don't work very well. One is, okay, if another person acts as a blocking dummy for football players, simulating a player that does not want to be blocked, it's not really the exact same thing because the blocking dummy kind of just stands there, whereas someone that is on the other side of a ball is trying to avoid blocking, and you need to make sure that you are blocking them. So again, how much does it really simulate what that blocker would be trying to accomplish? We do have negative transfer when practicing one skill causes a decrease in the performance of a second skill, again due to a change in spatial or timing structure of a movement. So spatially, if we look at it when you're trying to drive stick or manual in one car and then driving manual in a Volkswagen, okay, there's new locations, and so now you're trying to relearn these new locations. Timing, if we look at rhythmic between Guitar Hero versus actually playing guitar, totally different rhythmic pattern, and so we'll see negative transfer. Okay, and the effects are often temporary, usually only present at the beginning stages of learning. And why it occurs, one thought is memory representation. We have a preferred way to carry out a skill. Then cognitive confusion, we can think of that, right? And then dynamic systems theory is the competition between stable behavioral states. So how we end up looking at this? Okay, we can also look at bilateral transfer. So can we? So we're taking transfer to another level. So when transfer learning occurs between two limbs, we can usually look at determining whether there's learning in a non-practice limb as a result of practice in the other limb. So we'll look at pre-test, preferred and non-preferred, then practice with the preferred limb, and then look at post-test in both limbs. There's two types of bilateral transfers. We see asymmetric transfer and symmetric transfer. Asymmetric states that bilateral transfer is maximized by practicing with a certain limb, meaning it's better to practice with a dominant limb. However, we have seen bilateral transfer to be asymmetric, in which bilateral transfer is not affected by which limb is used for practice. But research indicates that for most skills, the greater amount of transfer occurs from preferred to non-preferred limb. And it's practical for multiple reasons. The neurophysiology behind it is looking at, do the two cerebral hemispheres play a similar or different roles in movement control? And then as a teacher, it's going to, we have to think it may be better to teach with a certain limb first. Then another explanation, the final explanation for bilateral transfer is the cognitive explanation. So there's certain pieces of information that are necessary for performing a skill, regardless of which limb is used. So practice with one limb allows a person to now acquire this information.